Welcome to the Memories of a Moonbird podcast, exploring life one story at a time. Hello, friends, and welcome to the Memories of a Moonbird podcast. I'm Daniel Scherl. Today on the show, he's a writer who specializes in young adult fiction. Born in South Africa, his 2015 debut novel entitled Stone Rider was a big success and has been described as a gripping, intense, and gritty dystopian thrill ride with nonstop action. His second novel, The Between, is being released this coming February 2020, and fans worldwide can't wait. He now splits his time between London and Paris with his partner, renowned French bridal designer Delphine Manivet. David and I are going to chat not only about travel, life, and writing, but also how important it is for people to just talk to each other, especially when traveling. Why is that? Because I met him on the train from London to Paris when I noticed he was reading a book that looked intriguing. We struck up a conversation, and that's where our friendship began. Please welcome, phoning in from London, author David Hofmeyr.
Hey, Daniel. Thank you for having me on the show. It's great to be here.
Thanks, and it's so great to talk to you again. How are things?
Pretty good, yeah. It's been a long time since I saw you in Paris, but you have to come over again. London, take your pick.
We can't wait. You're from South Africa. What was it like growing up there?
Well, I was pretty lucky. I grew up in a little town called Stellenbosch, which is a small little town in the wine region of the Western Cape. And it's really idyllic. You know, it's got mountains, it has vineyards, it's close to the sea. So, you know, it was a childhood that was all about climbing up mountains, diving into the river. And it was great. Marred slightly by the politics of South Africa, though.
I'd love to hear about that. Were you and your family and friends affected? Because this is the apartheid era, correct?
Yeah, that's right. Well, I mean, you know, so I grew up in the 1970s and 1980s in South Africa, and you're absolutely right. That was during the apartheid era. So there's and it's a shame because there were so many languages, cultures, and identities that I never got to know as a kid. Apartheid robbed us of all the richness of our own country. And also the world, and separation from the world and us and the different people in the country, I think made South Africa culturally impoverished. Plus, the government's propaganda, rendered any view of the world contrary to their fiat false, and so in a way that shameful reality of South Africa was kind of hidden from us.
And what's it like today? Have you been back recently?
Yeah, I try to go back once a year. My parents have a house in Plettenberg Bay, which is on the it's called the Garden Route of South Africa. So it's beautiful and it's right on the sea. And I try to go back every year. And I love going there now as a holiday destination for me. I will always love South Africa. It's a great place.
Do you feel that today, politically, it's better and the situation there is better than it was?
Politically, I mean, it's an unstable country politically. It's always been, always will be, I think, because there's so many. I mean, we have 11 official languages in South Africa.
Wow.
So there's so many different people from so many different cultures. And when you have that kind of a melting pot, you're always going to have issues. And then you factor in what apartheid did to the country and how it ripped communities apart. That's going to a degree, add instability.
Do you think there'll ever be a way for the country to unite and feel much safer and to appease all the different cultures in some way?
I hope so. It's my home country. Yeah, I really do hope so. And there's so much positive energy in South Africa. There's a lot of entrepreneurial spirit. We've just won the Rugby World Cup in South Africa. So, we won it here in Japan, and that's created a huge amount of positive spirit and energy, and there's a lot going for South Africa, and I hope it does pull around.
Well, I have a cool South Africa story, actually. When I was in 7th grade, my mother told me that she had a pen pal that she'd been writing to since she was in 4th grade. Yeah. So now my mom's been writing to this woman for 30 years in South Africa, and they both had children, me and my mom's friend's daughter named Jody. We were both born about a month apart. And so in 7th grade, I got a letter from Jody saying, hey, our moms are pen pals. You and I should be pen pals because it will carry on the tradition. Yeah. So Jody and I we started writing letters, and then eventually we moved to sharing cassette tapes. And then that eventually became, phone calls, and then Skype, and then video chat. But no joke, we've never met in person, and we've been pen pals for over 30 years.
How about that? That's cool. Where did you say she's from?
Benoni.
Yeah, I think that Charlie's Tron, I think you guys call it Theron, is also from Benoni.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so it's
I'll fact check that before I edit.
yeah, check it out. I'm not sure if that is true, but hey, check it out.
When did you first fall in love with reading?
Yeah, right from an early age. I was a bit of a nerd as a kid, and I remember asking my mom for one of my birthdays if she could buy me a dictionary. I think I must have been about 8 years old. But because I loved words, I loved reading. In the early days, it was Enid Blyton for me, Roald Dahl, Sid Fleischman, and then later everything from Tolkien to Stephen King, and then Cormac McCarthy. Anything, always. I take a book everywhere I go, and in fact, I can't really remember a time that I didn't.
Did you travel when you were growing up with your family?
Yeah, I mean, all the time. We traveled through Europe when I was about 5 years old. I remember turning 6 on the Eiffel Tower in Paris.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was a great trip.
Happy birthday indeed, man. That's awesome.
Thank you very much. But we were in a camper van. We didn't have a whole bunch of money, but we were sleeping in campsites, and it was a venture. And I saw these other worlds that I didn't. 6 years old, you just don't know this world exists out there. And then when I was 12, we went to the States. So we traveled to New York, Yosemite, Lake Tahoe, and I fell in love with America. I started reading a couple of years later or months later, Michener, the Centennial or Centennial and Chesapeake, big sagas. So I've always been a big fan.
That's very cool. Where was the actual first place you traveled outside your hometown? Do you remember?
There's a place called the Cedarburg, and it's a wilderness area about 2.5 hour drive north of Cape Town. And it's a beautiful place, mountains and rivers, and it's kind of remote. The kind of place that's great for hiking and floating in these coke-colored rock pools. It's a glorious place. So yeah, I remember that as most distinctly.
How old were you when you left South Africa, and why did you leave?
I guess I must have been about 25 years old. So I'd spent 2 years on the road in Europe and America after university, and the travel bug just bit hard. So, later, after I returned to South Africa, I had an opportunity to go to Hong Kong and work there because my brother was there working. And I just couldn't pass it up. So because of all this travel, I was so intrigued to go and live and work in another country, and I up and left. And, 20 plus years later, I'm still moving. Today, I move between London and Paris, and in many ways, I live a transient life. I'm a nomad, a wanderer.
And do you like it?
I love it. Yeah, it's glorious. I absolutely adore traveling and being in different places and meeting new people. It's in my blood.
Do you find any difficulty in having homes in two different places?
Multiple difficulties. Yeah. You got to have 2 sets of clothes. You don't want to travel the whole time with a suitcase. So you got to make sure that you have sets of clothes in both places. You lose track of some friends because they never know where you are. They call you up and say, hey, let's meet up for the weekend. You go, oh, I'm in Paris this weekend, and vice versa. So, yeah, there's complexity.
What's one thing that you like about traveling the most, and what's something you don't like the most?
I mean, there's nothing that I don't like about traveling. I like everything about travel. I love packing. I love airports, bus stations, pre-dawn departures, ferries, boats, backpack, you name it. I love reading on trains and falling asleep on planes, meeting other travelers. Like you said, you and I met traveling.
Yeah.
And that I've met so many people on trains and just sat down next to them and chatted to them. And I adore that. I love that whole process of traveling and exploring places without a plan, just seeing what happens. That for me is travel.
Now, a lot of writers that I've actually seen interviewed talk about how when they're creating their books, if the book takes place in an exotic location, they'll actually try to travel to a place that has those kind of features so that they can be inspired by the landscape and the people. And do you do the same thing?
Absolutely. My first book, Stone Rider, is an apocalyptic vision of the world in a kind of near future. And it's a desert. So I, wanted to travel to places in Egypt, on the Red Sea, also in South Africa, the Kalahari Desert, places where it's dry and arid and you get a real sense of the grit under your fingers. Yeah. So yeah, without a doubt.
I actually couldn't agree with you more. When Jolene and I wrote a screenplay together, and the 2 lead characters are traveling around the world, and we decided that at one point we actually were driving from California to Missouri to visit her family.
Yeah.
And we said, let's write some of the screenplay while we're in the car. So one of us will drive and one of us will have the laptop out, to really have that genuine feel of what it's like to have these discussions and these characters talking about life while on the road. And even though they might have been traveling in a different country in the book, it was a completely different experience, literally writing on the move.
Yeah, I mean, that'll give you total authenticity. You get that sense of you can almost hear the travel if you want once you start reading it. That sense of anything can happen and the serendipity of travel. There's a lot that goes on in those moments that will affect the way that you write, I think.
What is one of your favorite childhood books that you could read over and over again?
Childhood books for me was the Roald Dahl books were just, fantastic. So Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, I think I read about a dozen times. I love that book. So yeah, but all of the Dahl books were magnificent.
When I was a kid and we were in school, we started learning about European history, and I've always been a bit of an Anglophile, and I'm so fascinated by the history of all the different cultures blending into this space that's actually smaller than the United States, and to read about things that happened thousands of years ago, and it's not, I don't mean it as an insult to America, I really don't, I love this country, but the richness and the depth of a seaport that's been used for 3,000 years versus a place that's been around for a couple hundred years, it's just such a different experience. And
that's amazing. And this in here in England, it's you'll have a dialect difference between one little village that's 12 miles away from another village, and the guys speak differently, and that'll happen all over the UK. There's so many different cultural nuances, language traits that are completely different from each other and so close to each other, which you'll never have in the US or South Africa even.
So how much has travel been a part of your career as a writer?
Well, my writing career, actually not much. I've been to the States a few times for my books, New York in particular, and also San Francisco. And I've been to France a couple of times. But I have a dual career. I work as a planner in advertising as well. And in that life, I mean, I've been all over the world, from Mexico City to surfing with clients in Hawaii to Arizona, the apocalyptic smog of Beijing, all over the place.
Do you have a favorite place you've traveled in the world, both either for career or personally?
Well, for literary pilgrimages, I've been to a few writing camps in the hills of Devon and near Bath in England, but from a writing perspective, I would love to go further afield, something like a Felucca trip down the Nile or something like that. We'll see.
Can I join you on that trip? I'll videotape and shoot photos, then you can.
Done.
That would be amazing.
Done.
I have a friend who wants to go to Antarctica, and I said, if you can get it set, I will happily come along and shoot all the pictures and video you can handle. That'd be amazing.
Well, save me a place. I'm there as well.
Oh, fantastic. Actually, we should make a whole group out of it. It'd be fun. Take a group expedition and do a crazy trip. I love the cold.
To the Antarctic? Are you kidding me? I'm in. Yeah. Just all you need is a good coat, and that's fine.
Yeah, good pair of socks.
Yeah.
So where's the most fun or interesting place that you've traveled in your life?
There are so many, but if I was to recommend to somebody, if this is the place, would be probably the Okavango swamps in Botswana. For me, it's the Garden of Eden. It's an inland river delta which carries floodwater down from Angola and feeds this most startling array of wildlife you've ever seen in your life. Elephants and rhinos and lion, a hyena, everything. You paddle through these waterways in wooden canoes, and they're called merkoros. And you can see elephants come wading down through the reeds in the water, and then hippos rise up through the hyacinth, and hyenas yip through the night. I mean, for me, it's heaven. It's glorious. It's otherworldly. So yeah, that would be it, I think.
That sounds phenomenal.
Yeah.
It's
crazy.
Yeah, my friend in South Africa actually has a standing invitation. She's like, just all you have to do is get a plane ticket. You have a place to stay for free when you come down here. And so we're very seriously considering doing that for our trip in 2020.
Yeah, but you must. You can't miss it. There are so many places, and I could go on and on about different places around Southern Africa that you have to see. It's something else.
Well, if we do head down there, I'm definitely going to be giving you a call for suggestions.
Done.
What was the first book you read that made you cry?
I think there's a book called, you guys might not know this, but there's a book called Jock of the Bushveld by Sir James Percy Fitzpatrick. And it's a lovely book. I won't tell you why it made me cry, but now I must have been about 12 years old when I read it. And any book that's about an animal, and at some point bad things are going to happen to the animal, anything like that will make me cry, yeah.
Yeah, they give you you ever seen the meme that says dogs give you all the best days of your life except for one? It's a very true
I like
thing.
That.
Yeah,
I like that.
So how do you feel when you're writing?
That's a good question. I heard a quote once, and I rather like it. And I can't remember who said it, but they said writing is like riding a bike, except the wheels are on fire, the bike is on fire, you're on fire, and everything is on fire, which I think is a fairly accurate description, actually. It's hard. It can feel like a labyrinth. It's kind of like a puzzle that you have to work your way through. But for me, there's nothing more rewarding and fulfilling than writing a novel that gets published and that people actually read. It's complete creation for me. Something that was just in my head, and I've teased that out and I've transferred it to a blank page. So that it's an amazing, fulfilling feeling that. And but yes, it's exhausting and thrilling at the same time. Stephen King, actually, he had a better quote, I think. He says writing a novel is like lighting a match in the dark and then throwing it onto some wood. And then the fire spools out a pool of light in the dark and you begin to see a face, someone standing at the fire with you. Well, that's your hero, the main character, who then sort of reveals himself to you. And then you throw on a log and the light grows and you see more people at the fire. And these are the other characters. You throw on another log, and now you see the ground and the landscape around you, and more of the world becomes visible. And I think that's a lovely image, it's true of the way I write and the way I travel. I light a match, and I see what it reveals, and then I follow where it takes me, because that's, I think, where adventure lies, the unknown and the unfamiliar, the mysterious. So writing a book to me is actually very similar to how I travel. Just kind of follow my instinct and follow the characters when I'm writing and see where they lead.
Now, do you try to be more original and give readers a sense of what they want? I mean, there's a balance there, I think, with I want to write a story that's palatable and people are going to like, but I also don't want to compromise my integrity as a writer, and I want to give my message. So how do you balance that?
Yeah, it's difficult. I mean, I think the key is to write what you would have loved to read when you were a kid. And that's how I try to do it. And hopefully then that somehow captures the spirit of what people want from a book. Because you can't pander to what's cool or hip right now or part of the zeitgeist, because when the book is published, the landscape has already changed. So you have to write what's meaningful to you and the story that grips you. I'll usually have a couple of ideas percolating in my head, and then by some alchemy, one of them rises to the surface and I go, yeah, that's it. That's the story. And whether, readers like it or not, well, that's up to them. You can't plan for that.
It's amazing that you actually said that, because you're the first person I've interviewed that put that thought into words. And I've actually, believe it or not, like when I compose music or I write, I feel the same way, that I have not ever wanted to create something that I thought people would want. I have only ever wanted to create things that I want to enjoy. And it sounds selfish or narcissistic, but it's like, well, I'm the one living this life, and I only have me and my experience, the world through my eyes. And so I just want to put stuff out there that I would really enjoy. And if other people do, that's the gift. I mean, that's amazing, but
for sure. Yeah.
at the end of my life, I have all this creative, like when I built my travel website, honestly, I just said, I want to build a website that I'd want to go to,
People read through, if you're not being authentic and you're not telling a story that matters to you, I think people read through that and they can see it and they can sniff it out a mile away. So you have to do that. It's the only way to write, I think.
So when you're writing a novel and you have, complex characters and the development and the plot and different stages of development and stuff, are you a person that, takes vigorous notes on the computer? Do you have a board on a dry erase thing that you keep track of? How do you keep track of all your different plot elements and stuff?
I'm a more or less an organic writer. So like I said, I'll follow my instincts, but I understand the value of plotting, and I've read every screenwriting book there is, Blake Snyder's, Save the Cat, and Sid Field's 3-act structure, all that kind of stuff. I know, I've read them all. But the best way to do it, I think, is you write what instinctively you feel. You see, allow the characters to lead you and find out what the story is as you go. And then after you've hit a certain amount of words, let's say, 20,000 words, you then go back in and you start to layer in some of the plot points that that you have to hit. Because without those plot points, without that spine, that you're not going to create as compelling a story as you could. So it's meaningful to me to understand how the plot works. As to, the complexity of different plot lines going and subplots and all this kind of stuff, I don't try to write it down. I try to feel it out in my head. And that's why it's like a labyrinth. I like to kind of feel all these roots going out into the world, and I get a sense of them rather than being precise. Because sometimes I find when I'm super precise about it and I write it all down, it robs the story of its magic. It becomes cold somehow, and I don't know why that happens. But so I try to just let it, sit up there in my mind and try and tap into it.
So it sounds like by very nature, you're a free spirit.
Yeah, I guess, yeah.
Maybe that plays
sense.
into it. There's a part of you that just doesn't want to have to be chained or contained in that way. And it's like, hey, look, as long as you can keep track of all the assets in your head and write a novel, I mean, who can argue with that?
Yeah, I don't know if it's the right way. I don't know if there is a right way and a wrong way, but it's my way. So
when I was a kid, I sat down at a piano because my mother is a concert level pianist, and I wanted to learn how to play because I was fascinated by piano. And so I just sat down, didn't read music, didn't know a lot about it, and I just started playing, and it was really cool. And I started enjoying it. So I played more and more, and I took little pieces of paper. I wrote down the names of the notes, and I used Scotch tape to tape them onto the keys so I could learn which keys are what. But I never formally took any kind of real piano lessons or anything. Fast forward,
it's the way to do it.
Well, yeah, and then fast forward, 10 years or whatever, I'm recording a couple of albums of music, and I'm orchestrating for stuff. And one day this guy comes up to me and he's watching me play, and he goes, "What the hell, dude?" I go, "What?" And he goes, "Well, you're playing totally wrong." And I looked at him and I go, "No, I'm not. I'm playing music my way." And he's like, "Well, your fingerings are wrong." I'm like, "No, my fingerings are not what you learned, but they're not wrong. They're right for me." So it's interesting. Fuck him.
Yeah, I hate this guy already. What does he know? No, I think that's the right way to do it. I mean, you got to feel out things that work for you, and whether it's writing or taking photographs or playing a musical instrument, it's creativity, right? So you got to tap into what's inside you, like deep down in the subconscious. So that's your journey. You no one else can take it. So
if you could tell your younger writing self anything, what would it be?
Don't procrastinate. Don't tell people you're going to write. I mean, I was doing that for years. I was saying, I can write. I'm going to do it at some point. I'll write a novel, but I wasn't doing anything about it. So don't tell people you're going to write. Just sit down at your desk and write something. It's the same with travel. Don't talk about it. Do it. You can. It's not that hard to just sit down. It just takes a little dedication. You've got to sit down, think of what your story might be, start putting together. And if you have a word count and you hit that word count every day, a couple of months later, you have a novel.
And that's what I believe is, I call it tiny bricks. It's just something 7 days a week, 365 days a year, even if it's you just send one email, but every day you do something towards your goal. That's when things happen,
Yeah, I mean, it can sound a bit trite. I'm aware of that when you say to someone, "Oh, you just do a little bit every day." I mean, I understand that sounds a bit cliche, but it is true. And it's the only way you're going to achieve it, because it's daunting. You try and start a business or write a novel of 80,000 words. That's a daunting task. And it's not going to take you a couple of days. It's going to take you a year. So you can only do that by piecemeal, So
how long does it take you to write a novel usually?
Yeah, so my novels, I mean, I say 80,000 because, any novel could be any amount of words, but mine tend to be around that mark. And I figure, I can write about 500 good words a day on average. And that's, I have a full-time job as well. So otherwise it would be a little bit more than that, obviously. But I mean good words, so that, those 500 words are going to be going into the final novel, or at least the first draft. So that way, if I do 500 words a day, 80,000 words, you'll have a first draft in around 160 days, around 5 to 6 months. And then after the first draft, you kind of go, that's what the book is about. And then you have to fucking start all over again. Draft 2 comes along and that goes from there. But that first draft is usually takes about 6 months.
Did publishing your first book change your process of how you write?
I thought it would get easier. I thought, okay, so I've written a first book. My book number 2 is going to be a breeze. I just follow the same principle, and I couldn't have been more wrong. It was 10 times as hard.
Why is that?
I don't know, because the first book, there was no expectation. I had infinite amount of time to finish this book, and I did it. If it wasn't successful, who would know? I just went out and wrote a book. But in the second book, your editors and your publishers and your agent and your family and your friends, they're all waiting because they know, well, you're meant to be publishing this book in X amount of time. Where is it? And maybe that pressure affected me. I don't know. I didn't find the process easy. I find I had to dig deep and remind myself what it is that I know about writing, and then get back and attack it from a different angle.
People who aren't artists don't often realize that when you see a finished product, so let's say you see a painting hanging somewhere, or someone puts out, in my case, someone puts out a photograph on Instagram.
Yeah.
And they go, oh my God, I love your photography. It's so amazing. They don't realize that for every one photograph on Instagram I'm sharing with you, I probably have 100 that you're not seeing that led to that one shot. And not that I'm a shitty photographer, but I'm trying different angles. I'm trying different lenses. I'm using different lighting techniques. I'm experimenting with the creative art to get the image that I see in my head that I want to bring forth, or get caught by surprise and go, oh my God, look at that.
Doesn't Malcolm Gladwell call it the 20,000 hours? You to be successful in anything, you put in your 20,000 hours. Yeah.
So with your case, with writing, do you have a bunch of unpublished and half-finished stories or books sitting around?
Dude, you're kidding me. I've got loads. I've got maybe 5 or 6. There's more than I care to think about. It's the whole process is trial and error. And this is the business. You have to be accustomed to rejection as well. Even J.K. Rowling got rejection letters. Hemingway got rejection letters. So this is a difficult thing to do, to be consistently published. And there are no shortcuts or sure things. So many stories as well just kind of run out of steam. They go nowhere. And however, and because I'm an organic writer, I follow them, and then it just doesn't go anywhere. And I realize that it's not going to work, and I have to start again. That's how it goes.
Well, I have to tell you, people tease me sometimes because I actually read a substantial amount of young adult fiction. And the reason why is that I've tried to read adult fiction, and I'm a big lover of fantasy and the Dungeons and Dragons. I've been playing D&D since 1978, 77. Yeah. And that's what I write. I write, fantasy-based role-playing kind of fiction. And the thing I find most fascinating about young adult stuff is that it is actually more creative and imaginative than a lot of the adult stories I read. They seem formulaic, and sometimes the writers are trying too hard. And with young adult, I actually find that, and maybe the other part of this, and I have to be honest about it, is that it is possible I'm just an extremely immature human being, and I never really grew up past the 12-year-old boy who loves reading, which is fine. I'm fine being a kid,
I think the YA book industry is amazing, and they're on the cutting edge of so many things. When it comes to exploring transgender issues or race issues, you will always find those first in YA. I think they're doing an amazing job, YA authors.
So, what does literary success look like to you? If you could snap your fingers and
go,
this,
it's easy for me. It's number one, writing a worldwide bestseller. That'd be great. That'd be something. But for me, getting a book made into a film or a Netflix series, I could die fulfilled after that. My first book was Stone Rider was optioned by Working Title Films, and they bought the option. I think it lasted for 18 months or whatever. And then they bought a second option and they wrote a screenplay. But after that, they then didn't go through with it. But I was fascinated by that whole process. I'm fascinated by how the screenwriter saw the book and how he interpreted it. I wanted to see how that would be, how it would be translated into film, because that's a whole different way of storytelling. And, I just would love to see the evolution or the transformation from one format to the other. Yeah.
Is that hard for you to have someone else writing a screenplay of your novel because you're so close to it?
No. Writing for me is a bit of a solitary affair. It's me and my thoughts and my story. So once the book is written, I kind of go back into a collaboration mode, where I want to see how other people interpret it. So I was fascinated to see what he could do with it. And he did a great job. It was brilliant. And it sort of allowed me to see the story. It gave the story its own life and allowed me to see it from a different perspective, which I really enjoyed.
So the screenplay author obviously allowed you to read the screenplay then?
Yes, he did. Yeah. That's good.
And is this something you'll ever share with the public, or is it not allowed to be?
I don't know. Yeah, maybe it's embargoed or something like that. I don't know. Who knows? Working Title Film will probably come and send somebody after me if I did.
What kind of research do you do, and how long do you spend researching stuff when you're writing, especially before you actually begin?
Well, so I write science fiction mostly. So most of my books are legitimately just pure imagination. But I do research organically. So the Between, my second novel, is multiple reality story. It's kind of like Alice in Wonderland meets The Matrix meets Inception, the Christopher Nolan movies. So I did some research into string theory and quantum mechanics, all this kind of stuff. No, obviously not on a very deep level, but I wanted to understand the theory to a very basic level so that the story would have some muscle. and feel realistic, even though, I mean, it's patently not. It's a multiple reality story. But I wanted to draw on some of the theories that were out there so that you wouldn't read it and think, well, that's nonsense, that it would have some reality in it.
And does this process usually take a while, or is it a quick thing for you?
It happens while you write. So I don't go and do the research for a month and then start writing. It's more a process of, the story unfolding. And then I realize as I write a scene or a particular part of the story that I need to fill it with a little bit more information that I don't currently possess. So I need to go do some research on in Stone Rider. The characters use slingshots. And I didn't know anything about slingshots. And so I had to go research a lot about how you throw a slingshot and then how you describe someone putting a stone into a slingshot and shooting it out. And so one of the great feedbacks I got on my novel is somebody had read it and he said, it was a great novel. And he says, clearly you've been a slingshot expert for some time, and so am I. And maybe sometime we can talk about, our skills and all this kind of stuff. And, I'd never used a sling in my life. So that's a good compliment. I like that.
That's great. You completely BS'd your way through slingshotting.
Well, that's it.
Do you have any kind of process of how you select names for your characters?
Actually, that's one of my favorite parts of the whole writing process. I love discovering the meaning of names and how they play to the character archetype. So, for instance, in Stone Rider, my main character is Adam, and I wanted him to be an everyman archetype, so someone to represent humanity in a this is a brutal post-apocalyptic world, almost a biblical world. And so, he needed to have a name that heralded a new beginning and an everyman kind of a character. So Adam kind of suited him perfectly. I have another character called Cain, and he's an outlaw warrior archetype. So I wanted his name to sound like a blade cutting the air or a sword, And Cain actually means warrior. So yeah, I mean, it's just great fun finding names that speak to the theme of the story and character archetypes.
I agree. I needed to come up with the name of some geographical features in one of the fantasy novels I'm working on, and my dad's mother's maiden name is Kronman, Kronman.
I like it.
And yeah, and it's nice, and it's hard sounding, Kronman.
Yeah.
And so anyway, this area of the desert where there's this huge chasm, I named it the Kronman Divide.
There you go.
There you go.
I dig that. Yeah.
Yeah. Nod to my family, and I love doing stuff like that as well. It's cool.
It's also about the cadence of the word. Does it have this poetry to it, and does it have rhythm, and does it suit the kind of the tone of the story? Yeah. So it's a good deal of fun doing that.
If you weren't going to write, what would you do with your life?
Die, probably. I don't know. It's how I create. I mean, other people play music like yourself, or they paint, or they take photographs. I write. And the only other creative pursuit that I'd find fulfilling, I think, is film. So I imagine that must be tough, but rewarding. But yeah, writing is how I express myself.
Was there a particular scene in any of your novels that you found really difficult to write?
Yeah. So there's there's a mild sex scene in Stone Rider, and given it's a young adult novel, I wanted it to be real but not graphic. So it's a delicate balance and easy to get wrong, and I got it wrong plenty of times. And it's also, you're kind of a little bit embarrassed about it. You imagine your dad reading it, or your mom, or your family, or whatever, and you want to make it authentic and you want to get it exciting. But yeah, I don't know. You have to find that line between too graphic and realistic. It was interesting.
What's something you would give up to become an even better writer?
Social media. It's a total distraction and mainly pointless. No, I'm not a big fan. But I understand. No, I mean, I use it, but social media, it just distracts you all the time. You
and I grew up in an era without cell phones and the internet and all that stuff. So I think for people like us, it's a little easier to go, I could live without social media, no problem.
I mean, I remember traveling when I was 21 years old, and we were traveling through Europe, and we were meeting other people in Spain somewhere. I can't remember where. And, without a mobile phone, I actually can't remember how we hooked up with them. I think we kind of said a month before, we'll meet you at this bar on this street, and then you just kind of pitch up at that time on that day, and there they are. So it's an interesting, it's completely different to how we live now, and our access to digital and social media it's kind of changed the way we live, I think.
It's just so funny you said that, because the other day someone asked me, well, how did you make plans in like junior high and high school? And I had to really think about it, and I was like, well, I think I called their house and said, do you want to meet me at the park, and play ball or whatever? And then you just went, and I think people had to stick to their word a little more back then, to be honest with you, because if you didn't, then you'd be, ghosted or whatever. But the old school ghosted.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's interesting. Well, when you travel to a new place, how do you get acquainted with it? So, I mean, for me, I go out for a meal. I talk to people. I always love to find a bookstore wherever I travel. But what's your thing?
It depends. You can't really go to a bookstore if you're liking places which are off the beaten track. So, but I just explore. I roam the place, So I think I'm quite similar to you. I just go and have a look at what other people are doing. What restaurants look interesting. What's down that alleyway, and then I just kind of go down it and see, or go and have a look at. Just get a feel for the place. Wandering is the best way to do that. So I roam.
I agree. My dad said that we come from he used to say we come from a long line of wandering gypsies. And,
yeah, that's it.
But the truth is that we're actually a long line of farmers, but that's okay. In their own way, they were wandering. Has the majority of your travel in your life been with other people or by yourself?
Kind of a mix of both. I've traveled alone through, Southeast Asia and America, and there's something uniquely thrilling about traveling on your own. Every decision is your own. There's no debate, there's no argument, and there's something quite exciting about that and self-affirming, I think. But, at the same time, you're never really alone. You meet people, like I met you, and I've met loads of people traveling alone. You travel, and then you can travel, you sort of hook up with them for a while, you travel with them. And if things go south in that relationship, well, then you leave whenever. It's complete freedom. And it rips you totally out of your comfort zone. So I think I think everyone should travel alone at some point in their lives. But traveling with people that you love, friends, family, lovers, whatever, that's by far the best.
I agree.
And I've been lucky to travel all over the world with my brother Phil, and we never fought. It was always fun, always an adventure. And plus, we have all these shared memories. That nothing beats that. So I would advocate doing both.
When I moved to California, and I've probably told the story 20 times already on the podcast, but I was living in Boston, had made the decision to move to Los Angeles, and I drove to Cleveland, picked up my dad, and then he and I drove across the entire United States together. We took 6 days and we saw a bunch of sites. We stopped into different friends and family along the way. And after he died, it was even more a valuable experience for me to go, man, I saw this country with my father,
That's it. And that's, there's nothing more meaningful than that, I think.
Yeah. Is there somewhere that you haven't been that you really want to go besides Antarctica?
So, I've been to about 60 countries in the world, so because I've always traveled, I love it. But, there's a couple that have always been on my list and I've just never got around to it. So India, for example, it's been on the list a long time, and I've never really, because I've always wanted to go for like a month or 2 months. And you never have the time. So I've never settled on the time to go. Another one is, and I know you've been here, New Zealand.
Yeah.
It's an amazing place. I have a lot of friends from there, but it's a long way to go. I think it's closer for you guys than it is for me. But so it's always last on the list. And when I take a long flight, I usually go back to South Africa. So, and then there's other places that Delphine and I talk about a lot, like Turks and Caicos in the Caribbean, and Tulum in Mexico. That's on the list. But, it's a long list.
Jolene really wants to go to Nepal and places like that and see some off the beaten path things. So I think that's going to be pretty high on our list.
When you guys go, tell me, I'm there.
Great. Truthfully, I love meeting up with friends and saying, hey, we're going to this place. Would you like to join us? We're giving you a couple months notice. And then we all meet up and have a blast. And I've always, when I was a kid, I dreamt of having a kind of more cosmopolitan traveling life where I had friends all over the world. And at different times, we all met up in different places. And then I never realized that it was actually, I was living that. It was starting to happen it happened a lot slower than I thought. Like it took 30 years, but now, we have friends all over the map, which is great.
Yeah, for sure. It's fantastic to be able to say, well, I'm going to the States tomorrow, or I'm going to New York. Who do I know in New York? Oh, I know these 3 guys. I'll go and meet up with them, or wherever. It's a brilliant way to live.
So as a member of Britain, how do you feel about Brexit?
It's an embarrassment. It's a total embarrassment. I can't believe it happened. It hasn't happened yet, but I can't believe the vote went in favor of Brexit, the referendum anyway. And it's terrible. I think it's terrible for this country, and that's definitely the wrong thing to do. I voted against it. But be that as it may, I would have hoped that they'd got it over the line sooner. So the whole process has been a shambles. yeah, it doesn't reflect well on Britain.
Do you think that most people in our age group feel the same way you do?
I don't know. I guess certainly when you look at the stats in this country, it was inverse. I mean, by far the majority of people under the age of 30 voted in favor of Remain. So, but they weren't the majority of the voters. So, it's pretty sad that most of the guys, or many of the people that voted, are 70 years old or 65 years old or whatever, and they're never going to see the results of their vote. But the young people are going to feel the effect of it, and they voted the other way. So,
have you ever had to overcome any kind of particular challenge while you're traveling?
Yeah, quite a few. I mean, I was held up at gunpoint in Caracas in Venezuela.
Shit, really?
So, yeah, no kidding. And I was traveling with two of my friends, both South Africans. We were on our way to travel along the Venezuelan coast, and we were going to catch a fishing boat. We were sort of backpacking, right? So we were going to catch a fishing boat to Trinidad and Tobago. And so we had this whole adventure plan, and then some of them were going to go through South America for a year afterwards. And it was a while ago, so we had traveler's checks. And we drew part of the traveler's checks, we drew money at the airport, and we caught a taxi into Caracas Center. And that's when it kind of went all pear-shaped. So turns out the taxi wasn't a legitimate taxi. There were two of them. We should have known at that point that there was something dodgy about it, but there were two guys in the front, the driver and the front seat passenger. And at first they were all smiles, and they were saying, they're telling us about Caracas, and they seemed pretty cool. But then 5 minutes into the journey, we noticed that the doors were locked and the windows were tinted, and there was no way to roll them down. So we felt this is not right. We're feeling a bit trapped. And so we started to speak about the situation in Afrikaans, which is our second language in South Africa. And at that point, I mean, he must have got wind of the fact that we were sort of discussing this. That's when the passenger pulled out his gun. And he just went loco and started pointing to us and demanding all our cash. And we didn't think it was real. And then he tells his mate to roll down the window and show them that this is real. And so his mate rolls down. So it's not really funny, but anyway, he rolls down the window and he shoots off 2 rounds on the highway as we're driving.
Oh my God!
And at this point, your mouth turns completely dry, and you're left with no uncertain. You know absolutely that this is real. So, and then he got our passport numbers. He wrote down our passport numbers, and then he said, "Look, if you go to the police with this, we're going to plant cocaine in your bag. We know people at the airport. We're going to plant cocaine in your bags, and you'll spend the rest of your life in a Caracas jail." So we were terrified. And actually, it was the closest I've ever come to thinking that I was going to die. Ultimately, once he said, if you go to the police, we knew that he wasn't going to kill us. So then he dropped us off in some really dodgy neighborhood. And that was quite something. And one of my friends backpacked right through South America for a year afterwards. So, it didn't affect him much. The other guy stayed for a month and he went back to South Africa. So it affected him, I think. But, I learned a valuable lesson. We always be vigilant. Don't be afraid. Don't stop doing things, but just be careful. Don't make stupid decisions. Don't be a soft target. So
yeah, and street smart's common sense, and don't go out at 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock in the morning down a dimly lit street. Things like that.
Yeah, don't get in a taxi with the driver and a passenger in the front.
Wow. Well, I'm glad you didn't get shot, dude.
Thanks. Yeah, me too.
You've traveled so much in your life, and you've been all around the world. Do you have any travel tips that you feel just basic things that people should know?
I mean, I just think with travel, open the door and go. It's one of the things I'd say as well is if you're on a short holiday, let's say you're going for 2 weeks somewhere, stay in 2 different places. That way the holiday breaks up the holiday and it feels like an additional holiday. So you get this kind of added kick or added adventure that comes into it. So a holiday within a holiday. So that's one of the things I would suggest. And if you can, if it's not a holiday, if you've got more time, I would consider, if you're younger or whomever, to move to a foreign country for at least a year. Work there.
Or a student program, yeah.
Yeah, a student program, or go and work as a barman or a bartender or a waiter or whatever, just anything. Or if you're lucky enough, you've got a degree, or you can go and get a real job, then do that, because that's the only way you're really going to understand a place and understand the people who live there and feel the rhythm of it and the pulse of it. Live like a local. I've lived in and worked in Hong Kong, London, Paris, San Francisco, Cape Town. And, I'll do it again 1,000 times over.
So looking back on your whole life, is there anything that you wish you'd known when you first started traveling?
Pack light.
Oh my God, that's so funny. I'm not kidding. Every single person says the same thing. It's so funny.
Yeah, that's
It's because
funny.
all of us who are seasoned travelers, we all know we've all made the mistake of taking so much crap with us. And then you're like, now I'm carrying around 40 pounds of dirty
Yeah.
laundry.
Yeah, you forget. I mean, most places have laundromats and shops, right? You need another T-shirt, buy one. What are they, like $2? So, you need as little as possible, especially when you're backpacking. 4 T-shirts, you don't need as much as you think you need.
Unless, of course, you're a traveling blogger and you have to carry around a drone and a camera and lenses. And
Yeah, that's it.
Why do you think people don't travel as much as they should?
I think the reason why people don't travel is, we're creatures of comfort. So you get into your comfort zone and kind of want to stay there. And you think, well, it's a little bit more difficult. I don't know how to go about it. And you stick to what you know. But in my experience, and especially now that you can get cheap flights to far-flung places, I mean, I think more people are traveling than ever before. So
agreed, yeah. Our society was not set up to educate people to go out there and travel, that it's much easier than it seems. And I think for a long time people have made it seem daunting. Now, I will say the one difference between, of course, North America and Europe is that you guys have a litany of countries all connected together. We are one big country, that's,
yeah, I know.
And basically our states are like little countries, because they are different. Each state is a little bit different than the next, and there are different personalities.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. I mean, I was going to say that the States is you have a world in one country, and this sort of speaks to the idea of travel. Is it's not just about going to another country or somewhere far flung. Travel is a state of mind, So going into a neighboring county or a state is travel. You can do it close to home.
That is something that I try to teach quite a bit, that traveling doesn't mean 25 stamps in your passport. It could mean going to an arts festival an hour away. I say the same things over and over again because they're true. And really it's important to just get out there and experience life, get out of your comfort zone, really see the world.
Yeah, that's it.
I was talking to a friend recently on another podcast who's a pilot, and he's been flying for 29 years. And we were both in complete agreement that traveling makes a better human being. And if most people in the world would travel, the world would be filled with much better human beings.
Certainly, I think it gives you empathy, right? You understand only when you sort of can see somebody else's perspective can you really have understanding or an empathy for who they are and what they've gone through. And traveling gives you that, because you move to their, and especially that's what I was saying, if you go and live in a place and you sort of feel as if you're a local for a while, you get to see things from a different perspective. And you're certainly not so rooted in your own perspective, which I think is a good thing.
Yeah, I agree. Let's talk about food. Do you have a favorite food?
Delphine and I, we love Japanese ramen because, it's delicious. And, there's a restaurant here in London called Bone Daddy's, and it's the bee's knees. You should check it out next time you're here. We'll take you there.
All right, deal.
Yeah.
Where's your favorite place you've eaten in the entire world?
There's a place in Lang Kwai Fong is kind of the expat community, kind of all the bars and restaurants and stuff in downtown Hong Kong. And when I lived there, my friends and family and I referred to this place. It's an alleyway, and we called it Rat Alley. And there was I don't know why. I don't know if we ever saw rats there, but it felt like they could be. And there was this curry restaurant that served stellar meals on plastic tables in this cobbled street where the water ran and kind of rivers down the side. And I think we imagined seeing rats there, but the food was bloody good. It was outstanding. So it's kind of street food, but I don't know why, but that's one of my favorite places for all memories of eating in another city.
That's awesome. If you were going to be a food, what would you be and why?
Probably a stick of dry ostrich biltong. Now, biltong, I don't know if you know what it is, but it's kind of like a beef jerky, South African style. And ostrich biltong is bizarrely tasty, and it reminds me of these car journeys we had in the back of my dad's Ford Granada up the coast from Cape Town to a place called Hermanus, where you get a lot of whales and whale watching, and then onwards to Plettenberg Bay. And that trip always would entail a stop at a farm stall on the side of the road, and my dad would buy my brother and I each a stick of biltong. So I don't know, it's a good memory.
That's beautiful. We do a lot of chatting on the podcast lately about what we can do to be more environmentally conscious travelers, but I'm going to bypass that a little bit because I'm curious more if you think, as someone in my age group, I don't look at the world and see it as apocalyptic as everyone else does. I believe human beings have always persevered and found a way. And I'm not saying that there's not going to be problems and that we're not set up for some failures or bad experiences, but I'm not that dark about the future. I am very hopeful actually for the future, but I'm curious, you as a writer, and you've written an apocalyptic book, what do you think about the environment in the future and where we're headed?
Actually, I'm a little bit like you, to be honest. I'm pretty positive, and I think humans always find a way. So I'm a positive person, and I believe we'll find our way through this. Look, I write apocalyptic stories because it's fun. I mean, and it's great to twist the world, and in a way, I suppose it's a little bit of a warning, but it's, I'm not trying to be that serious. I'm trying to write a great story. But no, I'm pretty positive, and I try to do what I can myself, but I don't know if it's enough. In many cases, it just feels like a drop in the ocean. But yeah, I'm like you. I'm positive we'll find a way to get through and make changes.
Is there something as a writer? Do you have a larger purpose? Do you want to someday write something that changes the world? Do you want to just entertain and let that be the end of it, or do you have any major goals as a writer?
Yeah, no, I'm not trying to change the world or anything. So I'm not trying to write a novel that tries to get people to behave differently or anything like that. I can come across as a bit disingenuous, I think. So, no, I'm interested in entertaining. I write novels because that's what I loved reading when I was a kid, was novels and going on adventures through books. And I want to do the same thing. So, yeah, I'm not trying to change the world. Just write a great story. That's what matters.
Well, I think what's great about that, I have to say, is that I'm similarly built in that I create, I shoot pictures, I write music, I write because I want to entertain. But I also understand that the things that I saw and was exposed to as a kid, from like the Neverending Story to Dungeons and Dragons to the Choose Your Own Adventure books, like everything that I was exposed to really did change my world and provided so many incredible things. I went on so many travels and journeys in my own imagination. And so I actually think that people like you and I who want to create for this very sincere purpose of just entertaining actually end up being the ones who hopefully do change the world.
Well, I mean, in a way, that's a good point, because some of the nicest emails that I've got from people who've read my books, or kids, one of them was from a woman who'd actually bought my book for her husband. So it wasn't for a kid, it wasn't for a teenager. And he never read anything. He just hated reading, just never got into it. And he read my book and he loved it. And now, he started to read and he's gone into more things. And that, if you can move a person somehow through what you do, if your intention is to go out and move people, then you'll probably fail. But if you just do what you love, and by virtue of that, you move someone, well, then that's a great byproduct. I love that.
Very well said. David, what's your whoopee? Do you have a security blanket item that you always take with you when you travel?
I mean, my passport is my whoopee, but otherwise it's books, man. Like I said, I don't go anywhere without a book. So most of my travels are colored by the book I was reading at the time. And they make the trip so much more rewarding. I'll walk into a meeting with a book. So when I travel, it's the same. Everywhere I go, I've got a book on me.
Now, do you only do physical books, or do you have an e-reader?
Yeah, I've got an e-reader, and I find myself, I read a lot faster on the e-reader. But there's nothing I can't, the physical object, the book, for me, there's nothing better. Just the smell of the pages when you flick through them.
Yeah, it's awesome.
The design of the cover, kind of flipping to the back and reading I don't know. There's something about the object that I find beautiful. So
I agree, actually, and beautiful is the word I would choose. It is beautiful to have a book. And I read a quote once, a very simple quote. It just said, "Own books that you'll never read." And,
yeah.
And on my bookshelves, I actually built these really beautiful custom bookshelves in the apartment, and I have several books, some of which I've carried with me for 20 years, and I've never read them. But and I just like that they're there, and I might one day read them, I might not. But I have tons of books I've read, of course. But it's nice to have things that are just like, nope, I just want those there to.
Yeah, I think books bring warmth to a room as well. So whether you read them or not, it doesn't matter. I mean, they occupy the room and they breathe, and they create a different feeling in the room.
Yeah, I mean, it's the written word. It's the power of a human being has spoken some, hopefully, either piece of knowledge or entertainment, but they put in, oh my God. Yeah.
Don't cut that out. I want you to keep that in, right?
Okay, fine. I'll embarrass myself just for you. They putting that in, but they put all this effort into. What'd you say?
No, I was repeating it. I liked it.
Yeah. But yeah, they've put all the effort into putting the human word, the written word down into a book, and there's something about it that, I will tell you a kind of a sad but funny story. I was at a funeral for a family member years ago, and the priest, we all gathered around, and then the priest pulls out a digital device. I forgot what it was, some like an iPhone basically or something. And he starts saying, "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today." And he's reading from the thing. And I thought to myself, what the fuck's the matter with you, dude? Like, you don't have a real Bible in your hand? Like, how could you be at a funeral with it? I don't think that, I'm not a religious person, but I don't think that the word of God should be able to be deleted when the battery dies, And so I actually emailed him afterwards and said, hey, I just wanted to tell you that I don't know how other people feel in your congregation, but you ought to survey them, because it felt offensive to me on some level that I'm there trying to mourn someone, and then you're like, you're swiping through the, I don't know, man.
You went in hard with the offensive, right? But I guess that's how it made you feel.
Yeah, at the time, and I said, look, and I even said that line to him, that I don't think the words of God should be able to be erased when the battery dies, and there's something in the human connection to the process, the circle of life of everything coming full, and I think that those words printed on a page. Not that they can't be burned, but you know what I mean? Like, it's a more solid form of there's something earthy and connecting to a book, and at least for me. But he wrote back and he's like, hey, I certainly apologize and meant no offense, and I'll definitely survey, because you're the first person that's ever said this to me, and I don't want to offend anybody. And so it was cool.
No, I'm with you. I'm with you every day of the week. I'm an author, books, there's nothing better. So yeah, we agree.
What's your spirit animal?
That's not a question I get a lot, but I would say, it has to be a bird, And I suppose
why a bird?
Because what better freedom is there? They fly, they I think there's no greater, and they do, if you're talking about animals that travel, well, I think your Arctic tern in their lifetime, they travel more than a trip to the moon and back, or twice a trip to the moon and back. So migration, the spirit of travel is part of being a bird, and there's a bird in on the Zambezi River, the African fish eagle. Well, it's all over Africa, Southern Africa anyway. And they have the most epic cry, and they live in these most glorious places along the Zambezi and the Limpopo River in South Africa. So I think if I was going to be a bird, that'd have to be an African fish eagle.
That's awesome. Well, by the amount of miles you have traveled, you are another guest of mine who is also a moonbird, because you have probably traveled enough to go to the moon and back. So congratulations.
Well, thank you very much.
You're a member of the club.
Yeah, that's cool. Good club.
The last thing I like to do with all my guests is a little game called 299 Philosophical and Life Questions with Moonbird. And I have collected, through friends, family, and the power of the internet, 299 really cool philosophical and life questions. Some are funny, some are poignant, some are serious, some are not. You pick two numbers, and I'm going to read you those two questions. And if you want to pass, you can, but hopefully you'll answer them. So what are your two numbers between 1 and 299?
7 and 9.
Okay. 7. What are you not good at?
Maths. I suck at maths. Numbers. As you know, I don't know. I can't see I can see pictures when it comes to books and writing, but numbers for me are opaque.
All right. Number 9. What profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
Yeah, being a film director. Love to do that.
I was going to say, we kind of covered that. Yeah.
Yeah, we kind of covered it. You see, I knew that was coming, so that's why I picked 9.
Oh, you magically saw my list?
Yeah, I knew what was going on.
Across the ocean?
Yeah. So, yeah, I think, directors, that's a great role. You got to mix in the music. You got to have an ability to have an affinity with actors. You got to know exactly what the story and what the script is doing, and what's the theme of the story, all that kind of stuff. So it's kind of storytelling at a macro level, which I think would be great.
It is great. As a guy who has directed several things, I can tell you it's an awesome experience. Yeah.
Yeah.
It really is. It's like conducting an orchestra. You know a little bit about each instrument, enough to be able to have a conversation with the makeup artist or the wardrobe person, but you have the entire story in your head, and you see the big picture. So it's really, it's a wonderful thing. I highly recommend it.
Done. I'm going to do it.
Your next book, make it into a movie. That'd be great. David, thank you so much for calling in from London. I appreciate your time.
Yeah, my pleasure.
It was awesome having you on the show, and give Delphine a big hug.
Will do. It was awesome to be on the show. Thank you very much, Daniel.
Have a great day.
You too.
As always, thanks for listening, friends. Please join me next time for the last podcast of the year. It's my annual wrap-up called The Epilogue with Moonbird. It's a look at the year's travel and life lessons, as well as a cool story from some unexpected moment in my life. Until then, if you'd like some more Moonbird in your life, and hey, who wouldn't? Head on over to memoriesofamoonbird.com or visit me on social media @memoriesofamoonbird.